Welcome back to Sustainability Matters. I'm Tria Case. On today's show, we're diving into the world of sustainable travel, from how we move through our cities to how we explore the world. We'll see how our choices can affect our wallets, our communities, and our planet. And you just might reconsider some travel habits after what you learned today. We'll kick things off with a word on local travel from Andrew Falzone on how we move through the city that never sleeps and the innovative low-impact commute options helping New Yorkers get around.
When most people think about transportation and climate change, they think about cars, theirs or someone else's. All those tailpipes and traffic guzzling gallons of gasoline. In fact, in 2022, Americans used about 134.55 billion gallons of gasoline for transportation. But travel's climate impact goes well beyond that. Transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, responsible for about 29% of the total. That includes not just cars, but trucks, ships, planes, trains, and other systems that move people and goods every day. In New York City, transportation accounts for about 1/4 of the city's total greenhouse gas emissions. One of the most notable examples is the Cross Bronx Expressway, a notorious choke point along I-95. It's one of the most heavily traveled highways, not just in the New York metro area, but in the entire country. Because so much daily travel happens in a compact area, even small changes in how people move can add up, influencing emissions, air quality, health, and overall quality of life. That's why sustainable travel is such a critical conversation. At its core, sustainable travel means reducing environmental harm while supporting communities and local economies, without eliminating travel altogether. As the city looks ahead, New York is rethinking how people move, not with one solution, but many. For millions of daily trips, that starts underground and at street level. Subways and buses move more people than any other system in the city, and every rider who chooses mass transit over a car helps reduce congestion, fuel use, and transportation-related emissions. Above ground, bikes are becoming part of everyday travel. New York has expanded protected bike lanes, legalized e-bikes, and other small electric mobility devices, and backed large-scale bike share programs like City Bike, making shorter, lower-impact trips more practical across neighborhoods. And on the water, ferries are opening up another way to move around the city, connecting waterfront neighborhoods to job centers, parks, and other destinations, while adding resiliency and redundancy to New York's transportation network. Together, these choices point to a future where getting around New York isn't just about speed, but about cleaner, healthier streets and a transportation system built for the city ahead. So what does it really mean to travel more sustainably around the world? We'll head back to the studio where Tria is joined by 3 guests who have devoted their careers to answering that question. I'm Andrew Falzone for Sustainability Matters on CUNY TV.
Joining us today are Christine Weydig, an energy and infrastructure executive who led groundbreaking sustainability efforts at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, focused on reducing the climate impacts of major transportation systems. Susan Phllip, an associate professor of tourism at CityTech, who teaches about sustainable, culturally aware travel. And Joy Malonza, founder of Savali Travel, an eco-influencer, working to reimagine tourism in ways that support local communities and ecosystems. I want to thank all of you for coming into the studio today. Let's start with talking a bit about what is the connection between travel and climate change.
The transportation story is a climate story. And not only is it a climate story, but what we also really need to appreciate is when we think climate, we think carbon emissions, which is appropriate, but there's also a lot of air pollution that's associated with our conventional transportation systems, whether it's diesel buses or conventional jet fuel and aircraft. All of that also produces a lot of air pollutants that affect our communities.
Well, I think it's about the numbers, really. I mean, the whole nature of tourism, we use a lot of natural resources, right? Water, energy. There's so much volume of people traveling so that the impact just grows exponentially.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that also ties really deeply into where people are staying once they actually get to their destinations as well. A lot of hotels are built on wetlands that have been drained of water, for example. They're built on land that has been taken away from the local populations. They have a ton of golf courses or fountains on site, but then claim to have sustainability measures, which feel antithetical, especially when you have hotels, for example, that are built in drought-prone regions. We're seeing this right now in Oaxaca, which is facing one of the worst cases of drought and water shortages for local communities, yet tourists always have water flowing in their hotel rooms. So those conversations are deeply interconnected all the way down to even when people go out to eat at restaurants, understanding that the restaurants in a resort town are owned by the same entities that are tied to anti-climate change regulation, et cetera. It's all a massive ecosystem that is present in tourism but left uninterrogated because tourism presents itself as fun, relaxation, and not as something that is actively contributing to so many of the things that we think about when it comes to climate change.
Also because it's thought of as an economic opportunity, right?
Exactly. There's this idea that it's always a benefit, for example, with the jobs, et cetera. But oftentimes when you look at the jobs that are being brought to local communities, especially in the global south, because we're talking typically in these conversations about tourism from the global north into global south, those jobs are exploitative, and they are they don't have labor protections because of so many other systems that are taking place politically.
So then, how do we travel sustainably? What is sustainable travel?
I've spent much of my career at the intersection of transportation and sustainability, so this is a topic that is near and dear to me. We're on this journey to decarbonize the transportation sector. There are a lot of other co-benefits in terms of newer, cleaner technology, more efficient technology, more user-friendly technology, and better health and air quality for our communities. So we're doing a lot in terms of transportation infrastructure, the actual transportation hubs we use, whether it's airports or cruise terminals, bus terminals, subway systems, passenger rail, in electrifying a lot of these modes, but they're still what we call hard to abate sectors of the transportation system, especially aircraft or ocean-going vessels. And there we're starting to see biofuels emerging or cleaner fuels emerging as a way to decarbonize those.
Yeah. I think it's awareness. We have the idea that everything about travel is fine. It is a benefit for jobs, we know that. It brings in revenue and profits. And a lot of the world depends on tourism for their economic development. So it's really very hard to separate that from the harm it does when you think it's going to bring jobs or revenue. But that's what sustainable tourism is. It's about increasing the benefits and maximizing the benefits, but reducing the negative impacts, of which there are many.
Sustainable travel has so many components and layers to it. I know when it comes to the first part of traveling, which is getting to where you're going, that is a little bit more difficult to talk about in a more sustainable way. But one of the things, for example, that comes with it is interrogating the ways in which we can cause the least amount of harm as possible as we go around and see the world, including interrogating whether or not there are certain places we should even be trying to see, especially based on what local communities and indigenous leaders are telling us about whether or not they want a massive influx of tourists there.
That makes me also think about Hawaii and the fires that took place in Hawaii that completely changed those islands for sure, but also brought forward some conversation around climate change and sustainability. Was there anything that stood out for you in terms of the response to that and what maybe we can take from that in thinking about things going forward?
Definitely. With Hawaii, in terms of telling people not to go, it's a difficult conversation to have, because the aspects of tourism that are so talked about is that the world is your oyster, go out and see the world. But with the wildfires in particular in Maui, the reason why they were so hot and were able to burn so quickly was because of a lot of the wetlands that had been destroyed by the tourism overdevelopment. And framing things as more of a larger impact tends to have those conversations go a little bit easier.
I do want to defend tourism a little, because yes, agreed, tourism uses natural resources, water being a big one for golf courses, swimming pools, and so on. But in the case of Hawaii, the problem started with plantations in the 19th century, not necessarily with tourism.
So what I'm hearing is that where you go is a big part of what we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
Thinking about that for a second, places like Costa Rica. Costa Rica is almost 100% renewable energy, right? So their power structure is certainly being driven in a renewable way. And they've integrated sustainable tourism into their community for sure. Are there lessons that we can learn from what they've done?
Well, it's wonderful that they have set aside a good part, maybe more than half of the land as reserves, and that they were pioneers of ecotourism. So they used the natural resource in a way that was not completely exploitative. But even so, the danger for Costa Rica is that it relied too much, perhaps, on tourism. And they're having a problem right now in terms of overdevelopment. So it's not just about one aspect of sustainability and saying we're great, but what about other things within a destination, as housing, how the local people feel, and so on?
I completely agree on that. I think the one thing that Costa Rica can set an example for is their ability to completely reverse deforestation. They were the first country to do that, specifically in the global south, and that is truly remarkable. And they did that through providing government incentives in which farmers would be paid to protect their local ecosystems. So I'd love to see those government interventions taking place in other countries.
None of these things operate in a vacuum, right?
Exactly.
We have to get the whole ecosystem working correctly in order to make tourism itself work, but the rest of our society. So Christine, I mean, you spent more than a decade at the Port Authority, and you've been thinking a lot about infrastructure, as you said. Are there some wins that occurred while you were there that you think are giving us some good outcomes?
Sure, definitely. So while I was at Port Authority, the agency embraced a net zero climate goal, and that includes all scope emissions. So not to get too nerdy, but really that means emissions caused directly by the operation of these transportation facilities, but then also the emissions caused by the use of them. So think vehicles that drive you to and from the airport and the aircraft that land at the airport. And so that's a big deal. There aren't a lot of organizations that have a net zero goal for all scope emissions, but where it comes to how you effectuate that is the bigger challenge, right? You're talking about the built environment, a lot of infrastructure that's been built over decades and decades. And what it boils down to is really having a lot of the frameworks in place so that as you're redeveloping these facilities, you are designing to a net zero standard, but also circling back to the Hawaii example, you're also thinking about resilience as you're constructing these facilities or redeveloping them or modernizing them or expanding them. Because like it or not, climate change is here. And so those design standards are critically important, and it even goes to zoning and all of these things that seem very, perfunctory that governments do all the time, but they're very powerful tools in terms of advancing sustainability and resilience.
Right?
There.
What do you think motivates people to travel sustainably?
I think at the core of it, people want to feel like they're doing something good. They want to feel like they're contributing something to the world and that they're not taking away. the first initial reaction to being told that something that somebody might be partaking in as a traveler might be harmful is defensiveness, of course, because nobody wants to think that they're causing harm, especially when engaging in something that is supposed to be as joyous as travel. But then after defensiveness comes, well, wait, how can I actually learn and what can I actually do? And that's how people usually end up, and because at the end of the day, people do want to make a change in all their ways.
Sustainability as a community of practice has suffered from denying people things, right? Oh, you should not do that. You shall not do that. We can't do that. Everything is operating from, a scarcity mindset. Whereas what I think we need to do is both raise that awareness so that consumers have more choice and they're making choices that are more sustainable, but also doing the hard work of decarbonizing a lot of these modes of tourism.
Can you give us an example of a trip that maybe was more sustainable that you helped to organize?
Yes. So in July, I took a number of travelers to Costa Rica. Speaking of Costa Rica, we were in Sarapiqui, which was in the heart of the Costa Rican rainforest. And our focus was on really understanding how Costa Rica's tourism industry works, but from a very local perspective. So we stayed at a local eco lodge that also works to protect the local surrounding rainforest that it's settled within. We also, the highlight of our trip, in my opinion, based on the travelers' reviews, was an afternoon that we spent on a farm at Finca Eco Orgánica, which was truly amazing. Not only did we learn about, the farm's operations, but the ties of tourism and, 20th century politics, the history of Mesoamerica, all the way from the indigenous communities, and then what happened during colonialism with the arrival of the Spaniards, and then currently now, all the things that have taken place since the creation of the Banana Republics. It was a truly in-depth afternoon, and yes, it was travel and fun, but people learned a lot. So that was definitely a highlight of that experience.
Since we're probably not going to tell people they can't travel, is there something you think folks should be guided by as they think about their next trip?
So the first aspect of sustainable travel is interrogating everything, questioning everything. The other part as well is looking into other modes of being more sustainable, cutting out certain parts that are unnecessary. So for example, I'm a big crusader against cruises for this reason. They are unnecessary and they contribute to 25% of ocean waste. That is an absurd number. So understanding these things, researching the facts, and finding ways that we can travel that are not excessive. Also cutting out this idea that travel equals ultimate convenience, because oftentimes the pollutants, the things that are harming local waterways, local systems, etc., are caused by this desire for convenience, that all of it is wrapped up into all the things that harm our climate.
There are ways travelers can offset their travel. So not all modes have this in a really easily accessible manner, but for example, you can look online. There are online calculators to calculate your carbon emissions from, say, air travel. And some airlines actually now are offering, when you purchase your ticket, you can offset those emissions. Now, carbon offsetting is a very complicated space, so you need to have confidence that those offsets are really viable and durable. But what I will say is the airline industry has made huge strides in embracing sustainability and really thinking about not only how they're making investments. So again, an example right here in our backyard, JetBlue, as of this year, has a continuous blending of sustainable aviation fuel with their conventional jet fuel at the New York area airports, at JFK in particular. And so you are seeing these commitments on behalf of the airlines where not only are they making investments in what's a more costly fuel and the infrastructure and all of the contracts behind that, but also enabling the consumer to purchase sustainable aviation fuel as sort of, we call it an inset. It is a way of offsetting your travel, but within the sector. So actually keeping those additional dollars within the same action area, if you will, so that it could be reinvested into the solutions that that particular industry needs to decarbonize.
I think you have to think about who is benefiting from the travel. How do you choose? What is this destination promoting? What is the tourism product? How can you take one action? It's not all or nothing, right? You can just do simple things to help that destination and to be sustainable. And I think that's the beauty of it.
Definitely. I also say to keep local communities at the focal point in terms of how everything impacts them. I think there's so many confusing conversations around how tourism impacts local communities. One of the main things is to make sure that you're redirecting your tourism money. I don't want to just say dollars and be US centric, but your tourism money that you're bringing with you into local communities by staying local, eating local as well. And I think really at the core of it is the ability and willingness to consistently pivot, listen to local communities, listen to what they're saying, and then go from there.
I'm not the destination guru, so I'll leave that to the others. But you know, one thing, even hearing about your followers, I think that would be really helpful for anyone contemplating travel is when you become aware of something that's making that trip more sustainable, talk about it. Put it on your socials, put it out there, because that's what raises awareness, right? So a good example at JFK Airport, there's a new Terminal 1 that's being constructed. It will have a microgrid so that it's powering 50% of its operations off of clean energy. It has the biggest rooftop solar array in New York City of any airport in the US. It has fuel cells that don't combust a fossil fuel, much lower emissions. It has battery storage so that it can be more resilient if there's an interruption in power. These are places that you will travel through, talk about it, highlight it. It can be a model for so many other air terminals across the world.
So one of the things actually I wanted to highlight was the certifications. So you have organizations like the Global Sustainable Tourism Council that you can look for their certifications, or even B Corp, but always go deeper and ask more questions. A lot of times what you'll notice is the certifications won't account for labor. They won't account for those more community-focused initiatives that we are discussing here. So being willing to go deeper and do more research is really key.
For students planning spring break, I would say, you know, students want to do things on the cheap. Perhaps do some research. Choose a tour company that's certified as being sustainable. It can also be expensive if you want to do the whole bit of going with a destination that's certified and a hotel that's certified and so on. But you can take small action that is sustainable. They may be in a resort. Sometimes all inclusive. But I would say go out, have a meal locally, leave the resort, buy a souvenir that's locally made.
Absolutely, but I'm hearing loud and clear, know where you're going, know about the local community, support that local community, and also understanding those hubs, those travel hubs that you're traveling through. I mean, we can choose which airports we travel through, right, or you know where we're landing. So, an important aspect of it for sure. I want to thank all of you for coming here today, but for what you're doing in terms of helping to inform us all about how we can think about where we're traveling to, and making sure that we are doing it in a way that's mindful. And I hope that folks watching this today will take from this that it's okay to travel, but if you're going to do it, really think about where you're going and being supportive to those local communities. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Yeah.
Now, Caera Beightol is going to show us simple green choices we can make when we're planning that trip and getting out into the world.
Hi, I'm Caera Beightol, and this is Green to Go, where we practice sustainability in action. This month, I'll be taking a trip to Japan. My destination is Niseko, a town that's internationally recognized for its leadership in ecotourism. When you stay in Niseko, the accommodation tax that you pay is specifically set aside for environmental protection efforts and sustainable development in the town. When traveling, flights are always going to be pretty carbon intensive, so it's great to take a bus or a train when you can. But there are ways to minimize your impact when a long-haul flight is the only option. I'm using Google Flights in the ICAO's carbon emissions calculator to help pick a flight with lower emissions. And I'm also going to choose a flight during the daytime to help reduce the warming impact of the plane's condensation trails. These can have almost as much, if not more, of a warming impact than the CO2 emitted during the flight. I'm packing light to save space, but also because less weight on the flight means less fuel burned. I'm packing my snacks and my toiletries in reusable containers so that I don't have to buy a bunch of disposable products in the airport. While we're in town, we might stop for dinner at Zaborin, where ingredients are locally harvested. The menus change according to the seasons, reflecting what's available in the surrounding forests and farms. This supports local food producers, avoiding the carbon that's emitted when ingredients are transported over long distances. The resort also incorporates geothermal heating and cooling. Hot spring water warms the building on the inside and keeps the paths clear of snow on the outside. There are so many different ways to incorporate sustainability when you travel. I'll see you back in New York on the next Green to Go.
Please keep the conversation going. Connect with us on social media and download our CUNY TV app. And if you like what you just saw and want to support more great programming like this, just click on the link below. Be sure to join us next month as we discuss climate justice for communities most impacted by environmental challenges. We'll take a look at how policies and actions can make a real difference for neighborhoods on the front lines of climate change.